Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we're looking at Wharf. This is a 5-cost action and duration card from Seaside, and it says, now and at the start of your next turn, +2 cards and +1 buy. We have discussed some general things about duration cards in the Caravan video, such as like what happens when you thrown them. If you have not watched that video, I recommend you watch at least the first part of it, because it will just cover some things that are relevant to most duration cards, and this way I don't have to repeat myself in this video. First things first with Wharf. Let's get this out of the way right now. Wharf is a very, very strong card. In fact, this is in the top 10 strongest Kingdom cards currently in community rankings. Right, this is all the way up there with Chapel and Ambassador level strength. Just very, very strong. If all you're looking to do from a card is draw more cards, it's hard to find a card that is better than Wharf. Now, Wharf isn't just about drawing you lots of cards. It also does it very reliably, and it gives you a load of extra plus buys while you're doing it. Now, there are other reasons why you might want other draw cards instead, like, for example, Witch, gives out curses, which is good. But if it's just getting more draw into your deck, Wharf is really, really good at doing that. So what happens when we actually play Wharf? Well, on the turn you play it, it's a bit like Moat that also comes with a plus buy. Now, Moat's not actually a very good draw card on its own. But on the second turn, it stays in play between turns, then it will increase your hand size by 2, and doesn't cost you an action to do that, which is like playing 2 laboratories, and of course it gives you the other buy as well. So the total amount of draw you're getting is 4 cards. This is sort of the same as Council Room, but you only get to play it every other turn. So you're getting less draw per turn, but, it's got a lot of draw attached to this card. So the main strength in Wharf's draw comes from the fact that you get 2 cards at the start of your next turn. So this for free draw, so to speak, is very, very powerful, as immediately increasing your hand size does a whole lot for you in terms of improving the odds of finding important cards that you need to basically get your turn started, like matching up your villages with other draw cards, which might be more wars, it could be other things as well, and all sorts of reasons why. Like, there are various cards that can matter, like City Quarter to find other actions to draw off of. You could have, like, Shepherd, and you want to find other victory cards to get going. Like, lots and lots of different types of card that really just want you to start with a big hand size and match it up with various things, like Cellar, and, there's just so many examples. So Wharf is really, really reliable draw. Very consistently you get turns that are really unlikely to dud, because it's just starting you off with this big hand size, 2 more cards in your hand at the start of your turn. In addition to this, Wharf is fairly light on how many actions that you have to spend. Because it stays in play between a turn, you only get to play a Wharf every other turn. But because this is a terminal card, that means you don't actually need as many villages in order to support all of your wharves. So if I had 4 wharves in my deck, and those are my only terminal actions, I'm looking to just play 2 of them per turn, I only need a single village in my deck, theoretically, right? And that one village will support 4 wharves in my deck, right? You think about having 4 smithies, you're going to need 3 villages, but here you only need 1. Right, and every 2 wharves, you just need 1 extra village. I've described in these videos before how terminal actions tend to be a little bit more expensive than they seem, because they have what I call the terminal tax, right? You need to actually buy and gain villages in order to support those terminals beyond the first one. So you actually have to do a bit more to actually start using extra terminals in your deck. And Wharf doesn't have as big of a terminal tax. You can instead start buying wharves and focusing on draw sooner, and you don't need to go out and buy a village as often as you do when you're drawing with Wharf, as opposed to something like Smithy or Patrol or whatever. Now, once you're at the stage where you are drawing your entire deck every turn, it is important to note that technically you're actually getting a little bit less draw from Wharf than you would from your normal 5-cost card that gives you +3 cards. So I know Smithy costs 4, but that's the example, but there's loads of examples out there. I was going to say Patrol, but that can actually draw you more than 3. Like Torturer, for example, there you go. This is because you can't play Wharf every turn, and that means that you aren't getting quite as many cards as you normally would. So across 2 turns, each Wharf adds 3 of what I call stop card space, while if you got to play like your 1 Torturer across 2 turns, that would give you 4. So what stop card space is that is how many extra stop cards like you could add to your deck with each copy of that card that you add if you're at the stage where you're already drawing your deck. So for a lot of cards, in fact, for all cards, you have to discount the fact that you've got to draw the card itself 1 time. So Moat, for example, it gives 2 cards, but you only add 1 stop card space because, you have to discount the Moat card itself. And that's why, like, Moat Festival doesn't actually increase your hand size, because Festival is that 1 stop card that you get to sport. So across 2 turns, Wharf is adding 3. That's because it's like drawing 4 cards, but you've got to discount the Wharf 1 time. Whereas with something like Torturer, you are drawing that Torturer twice. So the total of 6 cards, you drop it to like 4 stop card space. I'll talk about this a bit more in the Smithy video if you're interested in some of the basic theory around like draw cards. So even though it is arguably slightly less draw that you are getting from Wharf compared to others, it more than makes up for it with the reliability and the consistency and the fact that you don't need to actually get as many villages in order to support it. Like, all of those are very important. And, Wharf is still giving you very good draw, right? It's still sitting somewhere between Moat and Smithy with 3 stock card space, but you don't need as many villages, which is just like a big bargain for it. And if you're not drawing your entire deck, you will actually be getting the full, 4 cards out of it whenever it's relevant, because you don't have a chance to play it every turn necessarily. So in that case, your Torturers, for example, would only be giving you 2 stock card space as opposed to the 3 from Wharf. But with Wharf, you're usually trying to get to a stage where you're able to draw your deck, so that's more relevant. Sometimes you just don't have villages available to you, and Wharf is still a very good terminal to play, even in the absence of any villages at all in the kingdom. So a lot of kingdoms where you have no village support, there's usually a question of, do you want to go for terminal draw and mostly treasures, or do you want to go for something else and then watch out for cards like terminal draw and maybe not play them? And sort of the main reason for that is because if you don't have any villages, then as soon as you play your terminal, if it draws you more cards and it draws other action cards, you have no opportunity to play those other action cards. This is what we call drawing them dead. So this means that kingdoms without villages tend to fall into either like Smithy big money type variants or like Courtyard big money, where you sort of just grab that 1 draw card and the rest is just treasures. Or you might have something where you're able to pick up like a load of cantrips, but at the end you finish it off with something like a militia or whatever. Wharf is pretty good card to pick in these no village decks, and that is because the extra hand size that you get at the start of your next turn makes it easier to find and play other non-terminal cards, such as like cantrip coins. So you wouldn't want to use like Merchant, for example, in a Smithy big money deck, because you've got a quite high chance that you're just going to draw a bunch of Merchants dead. Whereas with Wharf, when you do play it as terminal draw, on the turn you actually play it, you're not drawing that many cards with it, but you are drawing significantly more in a non-terminal fashion at the start of your next turn. And that just means that you are much less likely to draw actions dead and more likely to draw them in a situation where you actually get to play them. And so that means that with Wharf as your only terminal, you do still get to diversify into other action cards, despite the fact that this is technically a terminal draw card. And of course, if you do still decide to go for a deck that is mostly treasure, like a big money variant, you are less likely to dead draw other Wharves. Again, not just because you are drawing only 2 cards dead out of the 4 that you get out of Wharf, but also because the Wharf stays in play, so it is much less likely to collide with other Wharves as a result, right? One of the Wharves that you own is not actually re-entering your deck on the next turn, so much less likely to collide. Of course, all of this has been focusing on the draw, but there is another very powerful thing that Wharf does, and that is that it gives you a plus buy on each turn. So you actually get a total of 2 buys for each play of Wharf, which is very big. Now, given that Wharf is already a good draw card, and that you're usually going to want many copies of it because it's such good, consistent, reliable draw, this typically means that when you go for a Wharf engine, you just end up with an absolute ton of buys, and typically you're just going to end up with more buys than you can actually feasibly expect to spend on any given turn. Like, for the most part, if you are building an engine with Wharf, you just don't have to worry about how many buys that you have on a bunch of your turns, because you're never actually going to be able to spend that many. There are always ways to spend an absolute ton of buys, but for a number of the turns that you're playing, like, for all intents and purposes, you might as well just have infinite buys because you just can't spend them all. You get so many of them. So why is having a lot of draw and buys really good? That is because it makes it very easy to gain a lot more engine components quickly. So especially if they're very cheap. Like, sometimes you get decks that have very, very good, like, 2-cost cards for engines, and something like Wharf, you can just pick up a whole ton of them really easily. But even if they are a bit more expensive, like your villages cost 4 or whatever, you are still able to potentially start gaining multiple copies per turn. And because you have a lot of draw, that means that you should be able to get some decent economy as well. Not only do you need a sorcerer plus buy, but you've got to have the money too. And it's just easy to get a lot of money if you have a lot of draw. Another reason why this is good is because engines really like to have what we call pile control. Engines are the sort of deck that is allowed to end the game on 3 piles a lot of the time. Like, Smithy Big Money just can't do it. So having an engine with a whole load of buys available to it means that you can do things like sneak out buying all of the estates in one turn to just immediately empty a pile, right? And that threat of you being able to basically end the game whenever it suits you is a lot of power that the engine player can get, because they basically, to some extent, get to decide when the game ends, so they can just start building in order to just end the game immediately as soon as they get enough points. If you were to, for example, win the Wharf split 6-4, then each turn, if you are playing all of those Wharves, like maybe 3 on one turn and 3 on another, you're going to have at least 7 buys on a turn, and that is a lot. I said there's only 8 estates, so that puts you very, very close to just like immediately emptying, like one pile, bang, there it goes. And that's really good for an engine. Like many duration cards that we've talked about, there's this thing called balancing your duration cards, and for some duration cards it's really important. And Wharf is no exception. It's very important that if you have an even number of Wharves in your deck, you usually want to try and play the same number each turn. Wharf is significantly better on the second turn, both because it's drawing you more. Technically, your hand size goes up by more, but it doesn't cost you actions as well. So if you end up with a situation where you are playing 4 Wharves on one turn and like only 2 on another, then the turns where you have to play 4 Wharves, not only do you need like way more actions to spend, but you're actually drawing less. You end up with a smaller hand overall, and that makes it harder to like find your villages and actually play all of those Wharves. So Wharf is a card we should definitely consider, like maybe not playing a Wharf on a turn if that's going to actually bring you back into balance. So definitely do think of that if you see this happening. This can happen because sometimes you like start building and then you end up with getting like 10 money and 2 buys on a turn because you've been playing Wharf, and then you pick up 2 Wharves and now all of a sudden like you're completely out of whack. So just be careful. Wharf has this thing a bit like Fishing Village, I like to define it as a failure cascade, where because it's adding so much reliability to your deck when you play your Wharves, your engine is actually very susceptible to falling apart if you find that you're no longer able to actually play them. So this is because your next turn also ends up being much, much worse. So if I suddenly reach a stage where I can't draw my deck and then one of my Wharves was bottom decked, not only does that stink for this turn because, I didn't get to play a Wharf, but my next turn is much, much worse because suddenly I've lost 2 cards draw out of it as well. And what that means is that this can sort of compound itself and you can just end up never really getting your way back up. And all of a sudden, all of your turns just start getting worse as your draw drops significantly on your future turns as well. So it's important with Wharf that you consider how many victory cards you're planning to get, and maybe it's fine to just start overdrawing before you start moving into buying victory cards, right? Start getting other draw cards if all the Wharves are gone, and just prepare yourself, because Wharf, it hurts hard as soon as you can't start playing them anymore, so do be careful. All of this means that Wharf is a very high priority card. It's very, very fast if you want to build an engine. It gives you lots of draw consistently and reliably, provides you lots and lots of buy. That makes it much easier to start gaining more components in a shorter space of time, and puts you in a really good place for end game positioning that an engine wants. If an engine can get up and ready really quickly, then sometimes it's able to suddenly end the game before other types of deck have really had that much chance to start scoring any sort of number of points. It's also got a really low action cost compared to similar cards. It just costs you less actions than other terminal draw. This means that because it's so good, Wharf is often a high priority card. There are many boards that I have seen where your first goal is to basically grab as many Wharves as you can, and it's really good to win the split as well. So there's a number of reasons for this. Number 1, you just get so many more buys than your opponent. Number 2, it's just a really good card anyway, so you usually want more than your opponent because it just gives you more draw. But also, if you can win the split, you might, say, win 6-4, then you end up with an even number of Wharves, and that's a really nice place to be in. It's a bit more awkward when you have an odd number, so if you tie the split with your opponent in 2-play and you get 5, you just end up with these off-kilter and inconsistent turns. One of the turns ends up being much, much better than your other. When you played 3 Wharves the previous turn, you're drawing loads more cards. You don't have to spend as many actions on your next turn either. So they just sort of, you notice the difference. Now, sometimes you might have something like an outpost to play, and then you might deliberately have your deck off-kilter, but bear in mind that although you can use Wharf, you can play 3 Wharves on the turn, you also play Outpost to draw more on your Outpost turn, you are actually spending a lot more actions that way, because you're spending an action on Outpost as well that you are obviously not spending on the Outpost turn because it's still in play. So, Wharf, it's good, you usually want it. And because it's so high priority, that means you kind of consistently want to get your deck in a state where you are hitting 5 frequently, as soon as possible and as consistently as you can. Because you start drawing really well once you have Wharves, this means that it's a lot easier to use your starting coppers for economy. So your starting coppers, they're bad, weak stop cards. But if you can draw them all, then, they do actually give you money, right? They aren't the worst thing ever. They're really weak. But sometimes, you start with weak cards. Well, you might still be able to get use out of them. And what that means is what I find is that trashing, while it's always important, it's not necessarily as important when you have really strong draw, like Wharf, at least not immediately. And I find that sometimes if trashing one of the coppers on your turn might mean that you don't hit 5 that turn, then it might be more beneficial to not actually trash that copper this turn. That's going to depend, of course, on the type of trash card that you have. But if it's something like Trade Route and you're just trashing one card and you're not really getting any monetary benefit out of it, then maybe it might be better to just not do it if that would mean you'd have to give up the Wharf in order to do it. Now, if the trashing's really good, like Chapel, then, you probably still want to get really thin anyway, because if you trash that quickly, then why do you really need the draw straight away? But, if you can, get a bunch of Wharves in play and hit 5 a lot, then you can just start using your coppers for economy, and it's much easier to then build your economy after that. Right, if you still have 6 coppers, then you might be able to just buy a single gold straight up at one point after you start drawing your deck, and then you can you don't have to spend time going into silvers or whatever. You can just start big and go from there. So Wharf, just because it's so strong and it's so good, this is just another benefit that it has. And that's kind of it, all I have to say for Wharf. It is mostly just a draw card with buy, but it's basically Council Room that costs less actions, and it doesn't have the drawback as well of drawing your opponent's cards, and it's just very, very strong card overall. So what we are going to do now is we are going to head over to the online client, and we are going to generate some boards with Wharf, and we are going to see what sort of impact it has on the kingdom. Here we have good trashing with Sentry, and there is also technically replace. We have villages with Shantytown and Village, and we also have draw with Wharf. We have Ironworks to pick up villages and bridge and Conspirator, and this is just a stupidly strong board. Holy crap, there is everything that you want here. So we actually want Sentry before we want Wharf, because it's the only real way to trash. And we want to get thin because we want to actually have a whole load of buys in our deck as much as possible. But we also really want Ironworks because we want a lot of these. We've got Secret Passage as well. That actually might be nice too. Every card except Harem might be good here, and I don't think we really need Replace. But I would rather have Sentry and just trash the estates that way. I don't really see me going out of my way to get a Replace, honestly. But yeah, I would love to have Wharves and as many villages as I can. They are much better than Shantytown because I want to play a bunch of Wharves and then I want to play a bunch of bridges, and that's just a lot easier with the drawing village than the stock card village. So I'm definitely opening Ironworks because I think it's really important that we start grabbing these villages in particular, and some bridges. But I also want to get to Sentry, so I think I will open with... I might actually go Shantytown, Ironworks, thinking about it, rather than pick up a silver, because if I collide Ironworks and Shantytown, I can still draw 2 cards, and maybe that's going to be better. Maybe I even go for bridge right over village, but I'm definitely, on my first Ironworks play, yeah, we might not, because it's going to be hotly contested, we might not be able to play enough bridges to get province really low, but we have got Conspirator to make it very easy to generate a load of money as well, which is really good for the bridge turn. We might even get a second Ironworks at some point because it's just so important to start getting these cards. And of course, with bridge in play, we can start gaining Wharves with Ironworks as well, if we can actually start doing that. So, yeah, the Wharf and bridge combine with plus buys means that at some point, as soon as you get 3 bridges in play, you can just buy all of the remaining villages because you're going to have so many buys as well. So, Wharf, while it's the only draw, it's insanely good draw, and this deck is just absolutely mad. And really, we do want as many Wharves as we can get. Bridge is very important, but I do think Wharves are also really important because if worst comes to the worst, you can just start buying a whole bucket load of Conspirators, and if you don't have as many bridges, well, you're still going to be able to start buying a load of provinces anyway. So just almost every card here is incredible, except for Harem, which is absolute garbage, and Replace, we just don't need it. But everything else is great on that board. But yeah, Wharf is the only draw on a crazy engine, so obviously that's just insanely good for that kingdom. Even if there was other draw, we would still probably go for Wharf, to be honest. Here we have Moat and Wharf are the only draw cards. Our only village is Festival. That's a stop card village. Our trashing is Lookout and Remodel. Well, I would like to get thin because we have a stop card village that's really good for the engine. We have mill, we have workshop. We can pick up wishing wells with workshop and mills, it's fine. What's our plan? I think the plan is just to play as many wharves and festivals as we can, really. Again, we just have a stupid number of buys. We're going to have more buys than we care for. But just festival and wharf on its own makes for a very good deck. Now, they are quite expensive. It is a shame that we have workshop and nothing really better to workshop except like some wishing wells. But that's fine. We can pick it up. We can gain wishing wells and some mills, and then we can get rid of them. I think I'm opening... I want to open Lookout and Mill, but the problem is that if Mill collides with Lookout, then we actually won't be able to hit 5, because Lookout will just reduce our hand size to 4, and then we can't consistently hit 5 with Mill, which is one of the reasons why Mill is quite good. So, that's a shame. So what do we do instead? Do we bother doing anything else? Is remodel good here? I think we do get a remodel at some point because it's going to be easier to clean up the last of our deck than Lookout. At some point, Lookout's going to struggle because we're drawing a whole load of cards at the start of our turn, and so we might actually struggle to start trashing stuff with Lookout. But I don't think I want remodel straight away, so I'm going to open Lookout for sure. Maybe I go for Wishing Well. Wishing Well can also help in that it can help you find, like, if you miss drawing a copper and you see an estate, you know you're safe to play a Lookout, and like that sort of thing might be able to help you clean up some junk later on by giving you a chance to play Lookout safely. So I think I open Lookout Wishing Well, and I just kind of hope that the Wishing Well helps me hit 5, but I might actually be better off just with a silver instead, but I don't know. I think maybe it's fine to just have some silvers in this deck, but I would really like to be using festivals as the way that I'm actually getting all of my money. I might even have some treasuries, honestly, but this is all quite expensive. Or maybe I do just go Lookout Mill and hope they don't collide, but that is a bit sad. I don't really want to do that. But I guess if we're opening Lookout, we probably might not be hitting 5 anyway, but it is important to open Lookout here. Anyway, Wharf is very powerful here. Moat is not a very good draw card. I would much, much rather have Wharves. But at the end of the day, I might end up with some moats eventually, just because festivals giving me the money and the buys, and Wharf, I've got so many buys, it's very easy to pick them up, even if I can't increase my hand size with them, because my only action village is festival. But Wharf is very powerful here. We definitely go for the engine because Wharf is available. I don't think Duchy Duke is viable because it can't keep up with the sheer speed of like Wharf and festival together. Like Duchy Duke is too slow, I think, and there's not other good support for Duchy Duke. I don't see. I guess there's Mill. Mill is quite nice for Duchy Duke, but otherwise it doesn't look great for it. On to the Third Kingdom here. So we have trashing with Sentry again. There is a village here. It is only nobles, and the draw is Wharf, Nobles, Ghost Ship. Ghost Ship is very good, Wharf is very good, Sentry is very good. The only village being nobles is kind of a problem. Sentry being the only trashing means that it's really important that we hit 5 as soon as we can. So Workshop looks bad, and to be honest, Ironworks also looks bad here. The only things that you're going to be getting, like Conspirators and Moats, well, Conspirators are fine, but to be honest, I would rather be getting treasure maps, I think. When it is time to actually use my engine, I want to smash together 2 treasure maps. I think I will eventually pick up Ironworks to get treasure maps and Conspirators. I think I will get some, but I'm in no rush to do it straight away. I would much rather open... I think I'm opening... Either I'm opening double silver or I'm opening silver and Conspirator just to get one later. There's right at the beginning of the game, I won't have any collision. Is there any tricks with Moat that allow us to prevent ourselves from being hit by Ghost Ship? Not really. Moat seems pretty bad here. The only village is nobles. We kind of really don't want it. I think what we're going to do is we're just going to eat a Ghost Ship attack and, Wharf's draw, because it's duration draw, it comes after we've had a discard attack applied to us, so it's sort of like a nice soft counter to Ghost Ship. We still want to play one anyway, so we're going to have a copy of Ghost Ship, but otherwise we want Wharves. The Nobles, there's only 8 of them. They're stock card village. They're quite expensive. We won't actually have that many actions to spend, so I want to spend my actions on one Ghost Ship and as many other Wharves as I can get with my Nobles, and then the rest of the actions are Conspirators. And I will have, I think, one set of treasure maps that I will gain and collide at some point. And that's basically what my engine's going to be. And can I build up to double province? I think I can, and I think that's what I'm going to do, but I won't be going any higher than that. And we just want to hit our opponent with a Ghost Ship every turn as well. If our opponent doesn't go for the engine and decides to just go Wharf big money, which is probably the best non-engine thing here, they're going to get killed by Ghost Ship, honestly. It's going to hurt them quite a lot, even though they're going for Wharf. So, yeah, because our engine should be able to play a Ghost Ship every turn, and that's going to be quite good. So there we go. So Wharf, again, very important card on that board. Sort of the main goal of the engine is actually to just play as many Wharves as it can, really, so we can draw enough to play the Ghost Ship. Here we can get thins with Ambassador and Upgrade. We have, again, Festival and Wharf. Festival and Shantytown and Throne Room are the only villages, so they're all stock card villages, except Throne Room, but the only other non-terminal is Upgrade. And Lurker, which are also stop cards. So basically every village is pretty much a stop card here. I think we open Ambassador and Lurker, and we look to get 2 Lurkers, and we just start playing the Ambassador War, and then we start lurking, possibly 1 upgrade, and then we also, just to help with the ambassadoring, and then we get a festival, and then we start getting Wharves. I'm not sure. Maybe we do get a Wharf first, that's probably fine. But we're going to be spending the early game for sure, doing an ambassador junking thing. So what do we do once that phase is over and we start drawing? We want to be doing Festival and Wharf as much as we can. The draw's not going to be spectacular because Festival is the main village that we'll be playing. Maybe we can get some spare throne rooms and just attach them to Wharves, and they stay out in play along with the Wharf, but that's fine, right? We just get more draw. But what are we doing after that? Well, Festival's giving us enough money. If our opponent tries to do something that isn't this Ambassador War, we might actually be able to punish them with Pirate Ship. If they start buying a load of coppers to go with gardens, we can just steal a bunch of them. We can get some throne rooms, and we can just smack them repeatedly with Pirate Ship, and then. But they shouldn't do that, basically. Given that there's Ambassador, I wonder if there's Ambassador as well, and we're giving them all these estates and coppers, is Gardens actually good? I think the engine is too good in that case. We have Lurker to just gain a load of copies of these very quickly indeed. And if they do that, we can just stop ambassadoring them. We can upgrade it into a throne room or something, and then we can start going mad with Pirate Ship. So I think you have to do the engine here. You can't compete. There's just good support for it. If you're not getting ambassadored by your opponent, you will get thin very fast, and Lurker will just start giving you festivals and Wharves, and you will just be drawing very, very quickly with a thin deck and just gaining a load of money pretty fast. So Wharf very important here. You can't compete with the Wharf engine on this board with Ambassador and Pirate Ship punishing you if you try anything else. If both players go for the engine, by the way, no one's picking up Pirate Ship. You will basically have no treasures if you can help it. It would be terrible in that case. It's just to punish the non-engine. Right, here is the Last Kingdom. Our village is village. Our draw is Wharf. And that's it. We can get thin with Trading Post and Upgrade, which are fine. Which one do I want? Probably Upgrade, I guess I would rather start with. That can get me some silvers by trashing my estates, but I think it's just nicer to start with Upgrade. So we, again, want as many villages and Wharves as we can get. That's going to put a limit on how many terminals we can play. I think Smugglers will be good here. If it can gain us wharves directly, then that's great. And if worst comes to the worst, we can upgrade it later, and then we can upgrade that again, because it's going to go to a pirate ship that I guess we don't care about. And we can get a courtier or a bandit. Courtier's quite nice. There's quite a lot of cards, like you'll have wharves in hand maybe, that give you 2 things. And bandit can get us golds instead, but I think maybe I just prefer courtier. If actions do end up being tight, I would much rather have a courtier in my deck, do like action and money or action and gain a gold or something. Yeah. And again, if our opponent tries to just go like Wharf big money or something, then they can get... actually, I don't know. Well, we're going to get a whole ton of villages if they even try to do that. Because we can buy a lot of villages very quickly with Wharf. And like a courtier gaining his golds and buys or money and buy or whatever, and just a whole load of villages. Like each courtier play can be a village on its own with 3 coins and a buy. And if we have a lot of villages, then we can actually start doing things like just destroying their deck with pirate ship if they try to do big money. So yeah, it's another Wharf engine for sure. But villages are very important here, but so are Wharf. So Wharf and Village, I think, are the 2 most important cards. And what else that we do kind of depends on that, but we just want to draw everything that we can, and then we're going to go for trying to build economy, possibly with courtier rather than bandit, I think. It's going to depend, I guess, on how well we do with villages, but courtier seems nice. If you do have villages spare, you can get 3 coins and a gold, and I think that's just going to be better than using a bandit, I think. If there was throne room, maybe bandit's better, I don't know, but there isn't, so... Yeah, merchant ship is terrible. Pearl diver we don't care about. Trading post I think we ignore. Pirate ship we most likely ignore unless our opponent does something stupid. You don't really care for it in the engine. I think for the same reason bandit we don't care that much. Yeah, so again, Wharf, really powerful card here. And that was 5 out of 5, and Wharf was very good on all of them, which is exactly what I expected. It was like the power card on basically every single one of those kingdoms, and that's just because Wharf is exceptionally strong card, just absolutely crazy, and you just get these really, really good turns, and so, yeah, prioritise it most of the time, and you won't really go wrong. Anyway, that was Wharf. I hope this was useful for you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.